Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, everyone. My name's Elijah. Today we're here. We are continuing on pushing forward with the positional previews for the 2025 Baltimore Orioles. I'm going to go over second base today. This is an interesting position because I think that it's probably the one that we might be simultaneously most hopeful and least informed about. I am referring to the performance of Jackson Holliday. He could be, all world caliber player like we, have expected him to be, like we have sort of predicted since he was going as the number one prospect in the game, consensus number one prospect in the game. And he could also be kind of what he was last year, which is a negative value player. Um, and yeah, I mean, the job really should be his. So we're going to kind of take a look at what some projections are saying, how we think we should shape out this year, and some of the other names that are going to be in the mix, of course. Before we do that, I want to thank the sponsor of this show, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more. For every game, every play, and every win. Bet online, the game starts here. So, like I said, it's really going to be about Jackson. I think this is truly his job to lose. If you've been watching this spring, you have to kind of feel good about if everything goes awfully. We've seen Luis Vasquez, Vimeo Machine, and Levon Soto all actually kind of showing good stuff. Do not expect them to be like solid major leaguers on an everyday basis, but we do kind of have some good depth at the position. And that is, looking beyond what is currently on the MLB roster. Um, if you step back and go from a broad sense, you're really going to expect the same names that we had last year. Holiday, of course, will be on in the mix. Jorge Mateo, once he is healthy, you'd expect him to be in the mix. Jordan Westburg, was substantially worse as a second baseman than he was as a third baseman last year defensively. Um, that is one of those interesting quirks. He could certainly still be there, but at the same time, it'd be nice to just give him one position and let him eat the way that he did last year at third base. Obviously, so much talent over there. The thing that we all dream on is, I don't know, whatever we've got going on at first base. Jackson Holliday secured at second, Gunnar Henderson secured at short, Jordan Westburg secured at third. Um, and, next year, probably, hopefully, Kobe Mayo, maybe some Sam Basayo sprinkled in there as he's splitting time at catcher. These are the kinds of things you dream about. But for this year, even if Holiday doesn't necessarily put it all together the way we expect, Ramon Urias was still dominant last year. Um, put up a 115 WRC plus kind of as a part-time player. He obviously got more run when Westberg got hit, but only 300 plate appearances across the year. Um, just a super, super steady player across the board. We saw him get the gold glove at third base. Obviously, he is better there, but at the same time, Westberg is going to provide more. So you're going to defer to Westberg at third base. If you want to get Ramon's bat in the lineup, second base seems like the logical place to do it. Maybe you platoon a little bit with Jackson. Um, the splits on, I'm actually realizing I'm not sharing my screen here. The splits with Urias have kind of been interesting throughout his time. He's had reverse splits at various times. Let me scroll down to, yeah, last year against lefties, he was more conventional, running a 140 WRC plus against lefties, um, only 106 against righties, so still very much a legitimate player against righties as well. But if you want to try to run a platoon with him and Jackson Holliday, I think you'll find a lot of fans there. Um, but just showing real quick in 2023, he was better against righties. 2022, better against righties. So it's a bit interesting there from Ramon. Um, but he is very much available there. He's a talented player. He is just I don't know. You think about or I guess depth players who can come off the bench and immediately produce. And Ramon is kind of at the top of that list, and that is so valuable on a team, including the positional flexibility. The Orioles are paying him $3 million to be a bench piece this year, um, because he really does step in and produce. Uh, that feels good. We all dream on Jackson, and again, we'll talk about projections for him in a little bit, but if you take a step back and you have Ramon Urias just hanging out there and he has to step in, he's going to play fine defense. He's probably not, bringing the kind of range that Holliday or Westburg or really any of those depth pieces I mentioned would bring to the table, but he's going to be solid. He will do the job. Um, and I think, once Jorge Mateo comes back, he is much better suited to be a middle infielder. I know there are people out there who understandably knock his offensive performance. It is not exactly what you want to see, but as we are, looking like a pitching rotation that probably is not going to get a ton of strikeouts. Our best pitcher is Zach Eflin, who runs a low 20 strikeout percentage. Uh, I think that you're going to probably favor the defense up the middle. I think that's going to be more valuable, and I think Mateo would win out some time over Urias. Um, that is all again excluding Jackson Holliday. And I guess that's what everyone wants to see. So I'll just I'll get to it. I think what one of the fascinating things about Jackson is all these different projections will value different things in different ways. I was super pleasantly surprised that Zips actually has him at eighth in Major League Baseball in WAR for second baseman. Um, I will note that Jordan Westburg is sixth here, um, and that is just to say it's people who can play second base. It's not even just primarily second baseman. Um, but yeah, Jordan Westburg 3.6 WAR, but Holiday is slated for 3.1. I think part of what's so fascinating about that is that's buoyed by this 13% walk rate that they're projecting for him. Now, Jackson has always had good plate discipline. He's been, an uber disciplined hitter throughout his time in the minors. But if you look to last year, I mean, he walked 7% of the time in the major leagues. Uh, he definitely looked overwhelmed. That's coupled with a 33.2% strikeout rate. He's striking out one in three times that he walks to the plate, um, and walking, close to a fifth of that. So definitely that is somewhat optimistic from Zips. They are clearly relying on the fact that his entire way through the minor leagues, I guess I can say, um, I'm not seeing the minor league total immediately, but I can just read going back, 21.7%, 17.6%, 12.8%, 19.3%, 20.9%, 27.8%. He has had these ridiculous walk rates as he has gone along. Um, that 27.8 was his 2022, his first year when he had a 30.3% walk rate in the Florida Complex League. That is overstating because it was a small sample size. He only played 8 games there, but man, it's funny to look at. That is an elite strikeout rate, for a pitcher. Um, projecting Jackson to walk 13% of the time is really, really, I would say bullish. It's definitely not something you'd really draw up for most people. To put that in context, as of qualified hitters in 2024, that would be fourth in Major League Baseball after Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and Kyle Schwarber, just ahead of Nathaniel Lowe and Jonathan India, which are two somewhat surprising names there. But um, Holiday, he'll be good, but 13% feels a little bit high to me. Um, if it happens, I will happily eat my words. But the other thing to note here, they do expect the strikeouts to still be somewhat high. They have him projected for a 26% strikeout rate. That is definitely higher than you'd like to see, but given what we saw last year, I think it's hard to argue with. Uh, Holliday really, really struggled with the high fastball. I guess um, man, my tabs are not shown for me here. Oh well, I'll let it go. Yeah, I think, the thing with Jackson is like he's got some very, very serious things to figure out. There we go. We can see it properly now. Um, yeah, really just like struggled against the high fastball. You see pitchers were coming at him with fastballs over 50% of the time. This is a time where pitchers largely are moving away from fastballs to an extent. He had that weakness at the top of the zone. We heard all the stories of him hitting, foam balls with 25 inches of rise at 100 miles an hour off the pitching machine. This is something he's aware of in training, of course. And at the risk of saying, he's coming in the best shape of his life, like every video you see from spring training, the guy has bulked up a bit. So this is not someone who seems like he's coming in with the mentality that he's, this former top prospect and he's, the I don't know, Mike Elias's gift to the world. But there's a lot of improvement to be had here. The thing that you can rely on, I think, that we all should feel good about is, he had positive value as a base runner. He had neutral value as a fielder. I think that, is just, I don't know, small sample size. He's a really talented fielder. He was admittedly in playing second base, he was playing a new position, had been a shortstop his entire life. I think that, you can expect that Jackson will provide positive value this year, even if he isn't this, like 320, 360, 415 kind of hitter. Like, I think he's going to provide a lot of value. I think that he will go ahead and just be a solid contributor. I think, the chances of him being optioned this year and getting booted off the starting position, I think are much lower. Um, and yeah, some of these projections really support that. Like I said, the eighth most valuable second baseman in all of Major League Baseball is what Zips is telling us. There are other ones that are significantly less bullish on him. If you go down to Oopsie, that has him producing 2.2 WAR, which is, for all intents and purposes, a starting caliber player. They do knock him for saying they don't think he's going to play that much. That is partially, I think, because of the presence of guys like Urias, because of Mateo, Westburg even, and they only project him for 109 games, 469 plate appearances, but that's still accruing value at a pretty good rate. Um, yeah, it's kind of a coin flip as to what we're going to see here, but I think that if you take a step back and you look at what this team has compiled, Jackson Holliday doesn't need to be, um, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, he doesn't need to be a Ketel Marte. He doesn't need to be, one of these superstars. And he doesn't need to be, the number one prospect and like what you would project from a number one prospect. He needs to be a solid contributor this year. That's really all we need from him. He's talented enough to do that. Whether it happens, we don't know. But this Orioles lineup is so good in every other way that you need him to, he's obviously more than a role player, but he's going to hit eighth or ninth for us for, the majority of this season unless he really, really turns it on. And we need him to play some good defense. We need him to run the bases a little bit. We need him to not be awful with the bat. If he puts up a 95 WRC plus this year, I think we're all going to walk away pretty happy. Um, I think that he will be positive value with that, and that's fine. That's a major league contributor, and that's what we need. I do think there's obviously a world where he does much better than that. Um, we'll see. Yeah, it's interesting. But to bring up, I jumped to him a little earlier than I wanted to, but I felt like I was saying his name so much that I needed to. Do want to jump to Jorge Mateo a little bit here. Jorge is a fascinating character. He like we go ahead and we look at all this stuff, and it seems like he just never is really doing everything that you want him to. We have seen like there was the April of 2023 where he was the best hitter on earth. And he has those kinds of physical tools. You know, you do see it sometimes, but he's too aggressive. He gets in ruts. He starts swinging at everything, and that makes him a bit of a liability here. Um, we can see, like, you know, he's never posted a walk rate above 6.3%, which he did in 2023. Last year it was down below 5%. Um, you know, like this on base this is actually fascinating. I had not noticed this before. In each of the last 3 years, he's put up exactly a 267 on base percentage. Um, that's like Chris Davis with the K for the Athletics. He, you know, had a 247 batting average 3 years in a row. But yeah, 267 on base percentage is awful. Certifiably awful. It is not anything that you ever want to see from any one of the players in your lineup. It's really bad. But Mateo, despite that, has miraculously, you know, been a positive value player pretty much since we gave him that, you know, that big role in 2022 when he was our starting shortstop until Gunnar came up. That year he was worth 2.8 FWAR. Last year he was worth zero point 0.8 in only 68 games. You know, if you extrapolate that to 162, I guess I have to do math now. I started doing this. 0 0.8 times 162 over how many games? 68. I'm good at math, guys. That's 1.9. That, you know, it's a two war player. That's, you know, perfectly acceptable. That's pretty much it's pretty much, you know, it's close to starting caliber. You know, they say anywhere from 2 to 3 WAR is a starting caliber player in MLB. If you have a guy producing close to 2 off the bench when projected over a full season, you feel good about that. He is still positive value very much. So Mateo, you know, he's good. He's gonna run the bases. Obviously, he like puts up these great stolen base numbers in 2022 and 2023, the last full seasons he played. Over 30 stolen bases in each of them, 35 in 2022. He obviously is a threat on the bases. He obviously brings value with the glove. Um, he's, you know, the Orioles went ahead and brought him in on this, I think, $3 million deal, club option for next year. He's somebody that they intend to have around. And I think when he signed that deal to avoid arbitration, some of us were a bit confused because how does he really fit on this team? I'm not quite sure, but I do think it comes at the expense of Kobe Mayo, maybe. Uh, and, you know, poor Kobe keeps getting just shoved down the depth chart. But these kinds of players are valuable on the team. People that you can insert in a given situation are valuable on the team. And Kobe Mayo is not the kind of guy you play situationally. Very simply, you know, he can, if there is a lefty on the mound, he'd be great to pinch hit for, you know, or I guess to bring in as a pinch hitter. You'd love to see that. But that is just kind of wasting his talents. And besides that, there are two first basemen and two third basemen on the depth chart in front of him. You could argue that based on what we've seen in spring training, Emmanuel Rivera is in front of the depth chart or is in front of him on the third base depth chart. So Kobe Mayo seems to be sliding down, and clearly the Orioles think that it's going to be good to have Jorge Mateo around this year. They invested a significant chunk of money to keep him. They did, you know, they can always go ahead and non-tender. They can always go ahead and trade. We have seen this kind of thing with the Orioles before, of course, where they go ahead and they maximize options. Um, I had a friend tell me recently, I think I might have, I don't know if I mentioned this before. I think I've made this joke about the Orioles to somebody or another, but I had a friend mention to me that he makes or has trouble making decisions that limit his options. He's doing great. He's going to move and he's going to go see a new place and do exciting things, but he realized this about himself. And then when he told me that, after some time, I've realized this about Mike Elias. He has a hard time making decisions that limit his options. He wants to keep depth and talent in the organization at all costs. Um, and you know, it seems like Rubenstein has opened the pocketbooks a little bit to pay somebody like an Emmanuel Rivera $1 million to stay at AAA. You know, these kinds of things are really valuable in an organization, and it's very interesting that that's, you know, what you're going to put money into. And of course, it's not like the $200 million that were given to Burns or anything like that, but it's a little bit of money. And it's interesting that the Orioles clearly value that so highly. Um, but yeah, I guess I digress a little bit. So Kobe Mayo keeps getting pushed down. You expect him to not really be in a situation where he's going to come up and be a bench player for the Orioles. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think the Orioles are either going to trade him or they're going to clear the runway for him by trading Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn, something of that sort. Um, but all that's to say that Mateo is the guy that you can stash on the bench. He is the guy that can come in a situation, he hits lefties fine. Um, I guess I'll pull that up here while I do it. Last year against lefties, 127 WRC plus, clearly a solid line there. 488 slugging, 799 OPS in total. Even the OBP was league average against lefties, 311. So definitely, much more value in that situation. Uh, Again, with the platoon partner for Jackson Holliday, if it comes to that, if you need Jackson to take a seat against lefties, Mateo's kind of the ideal candidate for that. He does a good job there. So to reiterate that point, Jackson against lefties last year really struggled. I didn't realize it was this bad even, but 28 WRC plus, approximately 72% worse than the average major league player. He hit 100, OBP of 217, slugging of 200, 417 OPS, which is uh, horrifyingly bad. I do not think that Jackson Holliday will perform that badly, even against lefties this year. Clearly he's so young. He's going to take steps forward. To just highlight it, the guy is, there we go, 21 years old, 3 months and 3 days. He's going to play this entire season as a 21-year-old kid in Major League Baseball. He had a world of expectations on him. Expect him to do better this year. He is still growing. He'll figure it out. But um, that's really how we expect to shape up. I think it is Holiday's job. He's going to step in. He's going to be the go-to guy on opening day. He will play there a bunch. I think early on in the season, as he's getting acclimated, I do expect the Orioles to be working Urias into the rotation, whether that's manifested by Westburg sliding over and Urias taking third, or Urias just sliding into second base. I think that either way, you definitely expect Jackson to not, you know, although I think the bulk of it is his job. He's obviously the strong side of a platoon, being a lefty. Um, I don't expect him to just be let loose on the world. I think the Orioles are still going to use this somewhat as developmental time. They're going to keep Urias fresh until Jackson really proves that he's got a hold on the position, um, and is going to carry it through the year. So, uh, yeah, so I think expect Urias a little bit early in the season to get some time. Whether that's by Westburg sliding over or Urias just going straight to second base. Um, One of those guys will be getting some time at second base. Jackson will be getting the bulk of the time, I think. And once Mateo comes back, I think Mateo's role is heavily dependent on what Holliday is doing at the time. Whether he becomes more of a true platoon, which again makes sense, um, or whether he goes ahead and just kind of languishes on the bench, is used as a late inning, defensive replacement, pinch hitter against a lefty, base running, yeah, a pinch runner. We'll see. But I think Mateo, it's dependent on how long he takes to get healthy. There have been reports that he's swinging the bat, he's doing things. So, starting to come back, we saw him taking some reps at second base in a couple videos online. It's good to see him getting healthy. That was a pretty horrific injury last year, colliding with Gunnar Henderson. But we'll see how it goes. I think this, in terms of like what could really push the Orioles over the top as, a truly elite force in the league this year, I think second base is one of the things that could do it. I think if Jackson Holliday, really takes some steps forward, if he is anything like what Zips is expecting him to be, a near 3-win player, you have to feel really good about this Orioles lineup because he's arguably the weakest link. I I take that back. It's not arguably. He is very, very firmly the weakest link in the Orioles lineup. You obviously project some kind of stability, um, or I guess stabilization of how bad he was last year, and he'll be more productive this year. But if he take some steps forward. The first base situation, if we have the Ryans in a true platoon, you expect that position to still be fairly valuable. And then everything else across the board is just like every person you look at going around the field, we have one of the best in the game. So you have to feel really good about it. Second base, again, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be one of I think it's one of the only potential holes because, you know, I think that Jorge Mateo cannot really be given a starting job every day. Ramon Urias is not really a second baseman. Westburg, played worse at second base, so you don't expect him to be given a everyday job over there. And Jackson Holliday, you need him to be that guy, or else that position is just this kind of mismatched group of players. It doesn't really work as a cohesive unit without Jackson Holliday leading the front. And so that could be this kind of pain point all year. I think pain point is relative because I've said all of these guys in their own ways are very good at certain things, but pain point in that um, every other position on the field is just so, so solid. We have such a good plan there that this one being a little suspect and a tiny bit up in the air, tiny bit dependent on, us needing to see something more from Holiday, just makes it, I think, one of the more interesting storylines on the Orioles. Um, yeah, I'm fascinated to see. I think that there's a very good chance we see all four of the names that I've talked about and a couple more here. Potentially Levon Soto will come up. Female Machine, who else did I say? Oh, Luis Vasquez, of course. So, there's a chance that each of those guys could get a couple days on the team and be given a couple appearances, maybe not necessarily starts, but if some injuries, we do have a bit more depth at AAA. It'll all be very interesting to watch. Um, Again, second base, I think one of the more compelling storylines, but definitely I think it's not going to be where we look for our offensive production. Those are pretty well established. Shortstop, catcher, our outfielders are going to bang. Westberg's going to bang. So this will be, I think it's like maybe one of the less consequential things, but at the same time, one of the more interesting ones. And again, one of the ones that if second base really takes off, if Jackson Holliday is on fire, or if we end up getting some sort of like really well functioning platoon there, that puts us over the top. I think, that makes us really, really elite as an offensive team, of course, if we aren't already. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm excited to watch Jackson. Again, like at the risk of doing the whole he's in the best shape of his life kind of thing. He's only 21, so he's like literally still growing, but the dude looks pretty jacked. He's been hitting pretty well in spring training. You got to be excited for it. He's one of those guys we hung our hats on. He was the last kind of face of the rebuild, maybe. You could sort of argue maybe Basayo and Mayo are in that class, but Jackson was a 1-1 pick, so he's got that weight carried with him. He's got those expectations from us as fans too, and so we are going to look at him differently. And we're going to expect big things from him, and we will see how it goes. That's all I got tonight. Once again, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Elijah. If you could be so kind, as always, please follow the show, subscribe on your preferred platform or on YouTube. I always wave to YouTube as I say that. Um, if you could do that, if you could leave some comments, rate us, anything you can do to support, we are so grateful. And yeah, come chat. We are on Blue Sky at the Warehouse Pod. You can email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com, all sorts of things. We are around. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, if the Orioles can survive all these injuries that are coming through, I think that man, I think it's going to be a good season. I am a little bit scared about Gunnar. Those intercostal, I have pulled that. I have like just he does it in impressive ways where he's like swinging a baseball bat and hitting the ball really hard. I do it when I'm like just putting my hands up and kind of stretching. Um, but that can really hurt. So the intercostals and the muscles like right on your rib cage. So yeah, not a fan of that. I think we heard news about Andrew Kittredge is like seeking second opinions on his knee. Um, Man, Tyler O'Neill is scratched from the lineup. They think he'll be back in the lineup on Saturday probably. Um, there's all sorts of stuff. I'm very yeah. This is the time of spring where you just kind of start to freak out a little bit. Grayson Rodriguez is throwing 89-mile-an-hour fastballs. You just you freak out a little bit and then it all kind of seems to work out. I don't know how I think it will, but usually it does. Usually it's okay. And you kind of just like stroll into the season. And even if the first, week or two are a little bit rough, it all just kind of smooths out and you get in the flow. It's always bumpy. The engine's got to warm up. Everything's got to just kind of fall into place a little bit. So expecting that's all this is and totally not freaking out about the state of the Orioles this year. Nah, I think we'll be good. We've got depth all over the place, as we have talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. So we're going to be in good shape. We will talk to you soon. I think Tyler's going to be coming to you with another episode later this week, even though this one is a bit delayed. Apologies for that. And we will catch up with you soon. This has been the Warehouse Podcast. Those have been the second basemen. Let's go, O's.